Hey guys, good morning. Hey sir, good morning.
Good morning, Adam.
I don't see others have joined. Let's give another few minutes. Okay, I don't see people have joined that. But anyway, yeah, so I was just asking you guys a question last time. So how do you want to proceed? Do you want to give some time for practicing, or do you want to just go ahead where I can just show you everything practically and you can pick it up later?
A bit of a practical is good actually. Maybe.
And then I would expect some answers, right? Because honestly, I'm not getting any update. I really don't know whether you guys are completing or not. So that's a problem here because, yeah,
Can
it's
you hear me, Adam?
in the chat, but that's the reason I'm saying that it would be good if it's more interactive because even if you have completed, at least if you can just say or put it in the message, it would be good. Okay.
Can you hear me, Adam?
Yeah, Kash, I can hear you.
So yeah, I was saying that maybe a little bit of practical is good.
No, no, I understand, but I was just trying to check on the other bit. Yeah, but um, so how many of you joined in between? Because I think there was around close to 30 plus people, but is there anyone who joined recently? I think Surabhi, you just messaged. Yeah, so I'm just a little confused here. So from when did you guys join and who have joined in between? Okay, you guys joined from 31st. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, anyway, I'll give you time, but just let me know whether you guys are facing any issues or if you guys are not able to complete, or at least let me know whether you have completed, right? That will be easy for me to track and help you what is going on. Yeah, but if there's some topic that you're not clear with, just feel free to ask questions because if you don't ask, that's where even I would have to consider that you guys are aware of all those things or you have understood. That's the reason I keep asking you questions. Um, let me share the screen. So screen visible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me just start some machines. Okay, so just to recap, while the machine is coming up, we were trying to understand what is a Jenkins pipeline, which is nothing but declaratively you will be able to give the details to Jenkins rather than using a freestyle job. So in this, you're going to give everything in terms of a code. Sometimes we also call it as pipeline as code. So whatever Jenkins has to do, you can define everything as a code and Jenkins will try to run accordingly. Now in that, the basics, what we saw is you're going to have your pipeline within a block, this is example, and within the pipeline, you're going to have stages, and every stage will be equivalent to a separate job. And for that, in which machine you have to run and what are the steps it has to run, you're going to configure. And another point that we saw is anything that you configure within a stage is local, and anything that you configure on the top level outside the stages will be global, and the same thing will be applied for all the stages. Okay, so this is what we learned, and in that we try to understand the agent block and how does it differ from different values, and followed that we saw what is environment variable. So how do you pass environment variable again locally and globally? That's what we saw. Now to proceed, now similar to your Jenkins freestyle, wherein if you remember, we saw that if a job needs to run, you can pass some parameters, right? And instead of running the same commands always, you can pass a parameter, and based on that, you can ask Jenkins to run the job. And in that, we have seen there are different types of parameters, right? A string parameter, choice parameter, Boolean parameter, file parameter. Now, in the same way, when you are trying to run the Jenkins pipeline as a code, then you can also pass the parameters. Now, for that, there is a separate block, or technically what we call it as directory. Okay. Now, to take an example of that, all those parameters that you have in freestyle will also be available in the pipeline code also. Now the syntax for that will be something like this. So here, let's take up one by one. So now in a job, when you want to run, you want the parameters to be taken first, correct? And then whatever the steps that you have given in the job should be executed. So in the pipeline also, before you start running your stages, if you want the user to input the parameters, then in the top level, you are going to set this as a parameter, so that this will be acting as a global parameter, and the same values will be passed to all the stages. Okay. Now, over this, what you're going to do is you're going to use a new block called as parameters, and within that, all the parameters which is needed for this pipeline. Again, when I say pipeline, all the stages below this will be having the same values for the parameter. And what are the different types of parameters you want? You can put everything together. And this is where, now in this example, you can see I'm defining a string parameter, text parameter, Boolean parameter, choice parameter, password parameter, file parameter. Everything is just one example I've put. And how do you get the values of this? So that's where, now if you go back to a freestyle job, let me take this machine. Okay, let's create a parameter. So if you're creating a parameter, We'll go to the general section. Project is parameterized. And we will add a parameter. Now let's say I'm adding a string parameter. So what are the things that you give here? You will give a name, a default value, and a description, correct? So the equivalent of that is what you're going to give here. So string defines this function as a string parameter. And for that, the three attributes you're going to give is name, default value, and description. Okay, similar to what you see here. Name, default value, and description. The equivalent of that is what we have also given. So I've just given some name for that. Same way, if you take a text parameter, okay, or Boolean parameter, everything will have three parameters. For example, let's say I'll take Boolean parameter. So this also needs a name, a default value, and a description. And that's what you see here. Name, the default value, and the description. But for a choice parameter, what are the default values you want? So that you're going to put it as an array. So that way, now when you run this, you're going to get a choice parameter with a drop-down box in which these three values will be available. So this way, so whatever the parameters that you want, you can put everything together, or whatever is of your need, you can put it as a parameters block. Okay. And now within any stage, if you want to access, then how are you going to access? So this is where what you can do is you can simply say params dot the name of the parameter within the flower bracket will return the value. And since the parameter block is on the top level, it is going to be a global one. So if you go to any stage and if you try to retrieve, for example, params.person, and it will return this value. If I say params.biography, it will return this text value. If I say params.toggle, it will give me true or false. Same way, if I say params.choice, it will return me the choice that I have chosen. Okay, so that's where for every parameter name here, if you just say params dot the name of the parameter, it will retrieve the value, which is what you are going to use it later. Okay. Now, for this, what we will do, let me just try to run this. So let's go back to our pipeline job. Okay, sometimes what happens in the pipeline, it will not be immediately taking up the changes, because since you have given the parameters, it is expected that I should be getting an option called build with parameters, but that's not coming. So what you have to do is, whenever there is such a scenario, just go ahead and do a dummy build once and refresh. Okay. You should then see build with parameters. Because now if you understand, our job, that is a pipeline, has one stage, and for that there are some parameters needed. So that's when you run this job, it's the same way like your freestyle, it's going to ask all the details here. Okay, so this is a string parameter and this is a biography. Okay, and then the choice parameter, sorry, the Boolean parameter, true or false, and then the choice parameter where you have these values given, and then suppose if you have given some password, okay. And in case if there is a file in which you want to pass some properties, you can put this. So now, whether it's a pipeline or it's a freestyle job, it's the same way, but the only difference is how are you going to pass? That is what in a pipeline, we're going to give it as a block in the beginning. And with this value, you should be able to see all of them gets printed. So if you go here, it is the same thing. So first, it kind of gets you the parameter, and then it will run everything. So whatever that you can do it in a freestyle job, you can do the same in a pipeline. But you just need to know what is the equivalent block or directive using which you are going to define it. Okay. So let me give you this. Can you quickly try this and run and see how using your pipeline, how can you define a code? Can you try this? So we have tried that. Let's look at another option. Now, there is a new block called as options block, which is again going to be global, which means it's for the entire pipeline. Now, in that, there are different keywords or values that we are going to use, which we will see. So the first one is build discarder. So this is equivalent of in your freestyle job. You just go back. You take any job. We used to give this option called discard old bills. Do you remember? Where we used to tell whether you want to keep it based on a day or based on a number, right? So the equivalent of this is what we give here in the build discarder. Okay. So if you look at this example, now this is going to be a global value for the entire pipeline. And because of that, so we're going to give an option called as build discarder. And in this, I'm just trying to say keep the output to 5. That is the latest 5. So anytime I want only the latest 5 output to be available, and the remaining 3 should be deleted. And this is for the entire pipeline. Okay. But there are some options that we can use per stage. But build discarder is something which you are going to put it for the entire pipeline. Okay. So let's try this. So now we have almost 10 builds output, right? So when I run this, you should be seeing it will keep only the latest file. Okay? It just deletes all the previous one. So that's where every pipeline you can add this option in the top level. As soon as the 12 completes, the 7 will get deleted. If you refresh, it will not be there. See? So it keeps only the latest file output. Okay. So again, this is a common one for the entire stages. So we are going to keep it on the top level. But this is under a new block or a directive called options. Now, what are the different other options that we have? Let's just explore. Now, when a pipeline runs, at any point of time, if a stage fails, then the entire pipeline will be marked as failed and it will just come out of the execution completely. It will not go to the next stage. So at whatever the stage execution fails, it will stop and then completely come out of the pipeline. But for any reason, if you encounter a failure and you want to rerun the entire pipeline, then you can simply go ahead and use an option called as retry. Okay. So once again, here, if you see this example, I'm trying to put it on the top level, which is the global level. So here, I'm saying retry is 3. So when I try to run, now if it is Windows, you can use this. So this will try to stop the execution of the command after 10 seconds so that you know that there is a failure. Okay, pretty much you can use this. For those who are using Windows, you can use this. If not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Linux machine. So I will say sh and simply I can just say exit 1. What this will do, when you run the stage, when you say exit and 1, it means that it's a written code with non-zero. So it will fail this stage. And as soon as it fails, we don't have any other stage, but the same stage will be retried maximum of 3 times. So that at any time, if there is an issue, if you want the entire pipeline to be retried again, then you can go ahead and use this retry. Okay. So let me just put this also. Let's try this. You can see that there is only one stage that we have, but typically since it failed with the exit code of non-zero, so we have given a retry option. So Jenkins is kind of just going ahead and retry. Okay. So what will happen in that way is, if you give it for the entire pipeline, then if it finds a failure, it will go ahead and run it the entire pipeline. For example, here, let me just put another stage. Add this report. what is happening? It's kind of running the pipeline, but it doesn't execute second stage. That is because whenever the first stage fails, it will just mark everything as failed. Okay, but if you look at the output very carefully, it will skip the second stage because at any time if a stage is failed, the pipeline will just skip the remaining stages and it will go to the end. But when you look at the pipeline, the output will be visible as the entire pipeline is failed. But you can see clearly, first time failed, it completed the pipeline, but since you have retried, so it's again trying from beginning, and again stage one fails, and it skips the second stage and the pipeline itself, and then there is one more third retry, so that's where it's going to run the stage one again, and then it's failing, so it is skipping the stage. So this is how, if a stage doesn't exist, stage doesn't complete, Jenkins will completely stop the pipeline. But since you have given retry, it's kind of retrying it multiple times. Now, what happens if the same you give it locally? Let's say I put this option here. So what's happening? You can see it's trying to rerun, but what is the difference? So when the first stage fails, it is actually trying to rerun only the stage one 3 times because you have given the retry option only for that stage one. So that's the reason it will never go to stage two. So it's just trying to rerun the stage one itself 3 times because it is going to capture, and once this is done, if it is not successful, then it is just going to skip the stage two once and then come out. Okay, so this is where it depends on where do you keep your block. So if you keep a block specific to the stage, then it will be applied only to the stage. If you keep a block like this globally, then it will be applied to all the stages together. Okay, so that's the difference. So try this once with global and the same value. Try to remove this and put it within a stage. Within the stage one. Yeah, for you, if you are using Windows, then just remove this. Okay, if you're using Linux machine, then use it. Let's try these examples. I'm just putting it in the chat. Okay, for some reason, copy paste is not. Do it. Just share the screen. Just minimize the font. Yeah, can you just try running this? Let me optimize it. Okay, have you tried it? Okay. So, see, when we talk about a pipeline, it's actually a collection of different stages, right? And every stage is like a separate job which runs on different machine. Sometimes, if a particular stage is hung, then the entire pipeline will be hung. So what you can do in those cases is you can try to put a complete timeout for the pipeline. Okay, so that regardless of what stage it is running, if the time that you have given reaches, then the pipeline will just stop the execution. Okay, same way. Now, if you give the timeout at the top level, then this will be applied to all the stages. However, if you just put this within a stage, then only for running that stage, it will be taking up a time. Okay, so it's again up to us. Sorry, you facing any error, Jagan?
It's console error message. I think it's only for
What is that you are thinking? Can you share your screen?
1 second.
Can you share your screen?
Here,
The pipeline code, what is that you're looking? Yeah, I told you to remove that, right? So the machine that you are running now, is it a Linux machine or a Windows machine?
it's a Linux machine.
Sorry?
It's a Linux machine.
Then remove this command called back. That is for
Is there
others
any
who are
alternative?
using Windows machine. I just told use any one of them. Yeah, remove that line and run.
Yeah, is there any alternative for Linux?
Yeah, remove that line
Wait,
called
wait.
back. That is for
Okay.
Windows machine. If you are using
Yeah,
Linux machine, then just use it. Remove that line 11.
This is the expected behavior, is it?
Yeah. So since first stage didn't run, it skipped the second stage. That's expected. Got it?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Okay, can you stop sharing? So what I was trying to tell now is, if you want, you can give a timeout for the entire pipeline or for a particular stage. Okay, now let's try this. So I'll give a timeout of 15 seconds. And for each stage, what I'll do, I'll just call sleep for 5 seconds. Okay. And we will try to run 2 stages like this. So what will happen when I run this now? Each stage will try to just sleep for 5 seconds, nothing else to be done. However, there is a timeout of 15 seconds totally. So from the time the pipeline runs, if at the end of 15 seconds, if still there is any stage running, then the pipeline will get stopped forcibly. But if all the stages complete within the 15 seconds, nothing else to be done. So that's where here I can set up a timeout for the entire pipeline. Okay. So now I'll run. There should not be any issue. So you can see it is setting up a total time to expire, which is 15 seconds. And within that 5 seconds, both the stages will complete. So there is no problem. And that's where both the stages will execute together with the time. Now just to change, what I'll do, I'll change the time here to 8 seconds. Okay, just to show you. Now what will happen? The first stage will run, but while the second stage is running, the timeout of 8 seconds will be met. So at that time, whatever the stage it is running, it will forcibly stop it. Okay, so you can see the pipeline is marked as aborted and exactly at the second stage. So if you go back and look at the output, you should see that for the entire pipeline, it has started with 8 seconds, but however, it completed the first stage, but while second stage is running, the timeout has met. So that's where it is kind of interrupting or stopping the entire pipeline. Okay. Now the same, if you want, you can put this option as a timeout for every stage. Then for each of the stage, whatever the time that you take will be taken. And if the timeout is reached, then it will stop only that stage. Okay. So just try this once, change the value. Yeah, just copy paste it. So just try running this and change the value of timeout and try it. And if possible, try to put the same options within a stage and see how does it behave. Yeah. So for this. Okay, have you tried? Others? Now, similar to retry and timeout, so you also have an option called timestamp. Okay, so by adding this, Jenkins will be displaying the time of execution of every step that you have, because by default, Jenkins will not be showing any output. So if you go back here, if you look at this, it doesn't show about the time at when the steps for each stage is getting executed. So if you just add another option called as timestamp, and then if you run, For every step that it is executing, you will get a timestamp so that you will know what, when exactly the time. Stamps. See, for every step that it runs, it will give you the timestamp, so you can kind of know what happened when. Okay, so that will be more appropriate. Again, all of them are part of your options block. Okay. Now, there is another important option that we have in a pipeline, especially under options, is what we call it as disable concurrent build. Now, what happens by default? A pipeline can be executed multiple times in parallel. So there is no control on it. But for certain scenarios, if you do not want the pipeline to execute more than once in parallel, then you can enable, so that if one time the job is running or the pipeline is running, if a user comes back and clicks on it again, it will go in a waiting period. It will not run immediately. Only after the previous execution completes, it will go ahead and complete the execution. Okay. So in the same output, watch what I'll do. Right now, I'll do a small change. I'll remove this timeout for a minute. Okay. And I'll give, let's say, 15 seconds together. So that totally it will run for 20 seconds. Okay, so now there is one execution. Now if you go ahead and just click on build now once again, okay, so what will happen? It will kind of take 2 executions or more than that. So this is where, depending on how many executors are available in the machine, if you run by default, the pipeline will allow parallel execution. But this is not going to be suitable in most of the scenarios. So in that case, what you can do, you can just add this disable concurrent builds option. Okay. And if you run at any time, Jenkins will allow only one execution. Okay. The next execution, whoever is trying to run, will be in queue. So watch now. Complete. So if I try to now run this, there is one execution. Now let me run it again. So you can see it goes in waiting or in queue. So that's how, by adding this new keyword called disable concurrent builds, what will happen? We can tell pipeline whether it should run in parallel or whether it should wait for execution, so that one at a time. Okay. So can you just try adding this and see the difference quickly? Just try adding this as an option and run and see how it feels. Okay, those are completed. If you want, take a 10 minutes break. Is everyone back? Others? Right. So now we were trying to see different kinds of blocks and options, but let's focus exactly on what are the different types of steps that you have. So in a freestyle, if you want to run a task, which could be calling a script or a OS command, then if it's a Linux machine, then what you will do is basically, if I just go back to the job, you will create a step called execute shell and give all the commands that you want, right? So the equivalent of creating a step called execute shell is what we have done using sh. So if you have multiple sh, and instead of bash, the bash shell, if you want to, then here you will be giving it as bat. Okay. But other than just calling a command, what are the different steps that we have? So this is where now in Jenkins pipeline, you do not have an option directly called SEM, like how in a freestyle if you go. We had this option called SEM. Now here you will give whatever the repo you want, and the first thing Jenkins will do is clone, right? Now this is where in pipeline, there is no hard-coded option, but instead, when you try to take a step, there is a step in which instead of calling a Linux shell or a Windows bash command prompt, you can call a git executable and ask Jenkins pipeline to do a clone. And this can happen at any stage. So that is where it's not mandatory, it should happen first and the next steps like your freestyle. Here you can give the steps wherever you want. So for that, what you're going to do is use a step of executable called as git. And in this, you are going to give what are the different options that you want. Now, to show this example, what I want to do now is, I just want to have a single step. And in this step, I'm telling first run echo command and then again echo command. But here I'm going to use git. Now in this git step, I'm telling that there is a repo in this location. So try to do a clone of it. And in that, which branch that you want to check out by default. So that is master. So when you run the step, whenever this step is called or whenever this stage is called, Jenkins will go ahead and do a checkout or clone of your workspace. Unlike your freestyle job, this doesn't get happen in the beginning. So you have to tell when exactly it has to run. Okay. So let's just see that. But when it does a clone, where will it clone? It will clone to the default remote root directory workspace folder. So just check this. So here you have one stage, and you can see what Jenkins has done. Exactly at the step where you want, you can do a clone. Okay, so in the freestyle job, this is the first thing that will get executed. Whereas in the pipeline, you have to call it as a step wherever you want. Okay, and this is going to be cloning it under remote root directory workspace in the name of the job. That will be a folder. This is what we call it as the workspace for this job. Okay, so just try it once and see where does the clone happen. You have tried that. That's good. Others tried it? So another great feature of pipeline is I told you that you can call any stage, any step, anytime you want. So if you go back to your freestyle job, we were trying to understand something called as downstream dependency, right? So in that, what did we do? Once we complete one job, we can call another job, correct? But when was that happening? That was usually happening at the end. So that's where, when you want to do some series of steps on different machines in a freestyle job, you always have to wait for the job to complete and then trigger another job. So in pipeline, instead of that, there is a step called as build. So in this, what you can do, you can call another build or another job, and you can tell either to wait for that job to complete, or you can just trigger and proceed with next stages. Okay. To understand it, let's take this. So I'm just having a stage here called as nightly. Okay. Now here, what I'm going to do, the only step that I'm giving here is build, and I'm telling call this. So what will Jenkins pipeline do? While it is running this stage, the only step that I have is invoking this build, which is nothing but it will go and trigger this job. However, by default, it will be waiting for this job to complete. And only when this job is complete, this step is considered complete. And when nothing else is there, it will go to the second stage. So the meaning is, unless and until this job is not completed, the pipeline will wait in the stage 1 or the nightly stage until this is complete. And only after receiving, it will proceed with the next one. Okay. Now, for that, let's first see, do we have a job with this or with bring it? So I already have a job called as nightly bit. Okay, so I'll just change the name here. So you guys can change this to whatever the name of another job that you have. And now let's try to run. Just pay attention. Okay, so you can see it's calling the first stage, and in this stage, it's scheduling a build for this job called nightly build. And if you look at the output, it should clearly tell you the stage got executed, and in that it's calling this job called nightly build, and it is waiting until it is going to complete. Only when this is complete, the stage is marked as complete and it will go to the second stage. But why is it still waiting? So if I come back and look into this job, so if you see here, what's happening? The job is unable to run, but until this is not completed, first thing to note, this pipeline stage will not proceed. So it will wait until this is going to be complete. So this is one behavior, but why is it waiting? Because it is not completed. But the question now here comes is, why is this not yet started? So the reason behind here is, in my Jenkins, okay, so totally how many machines I have currently in the demo group? So if you come down, there is only one machine in the group called demo, and in that machine has only one executor. And you can see it is the same which I am using for my pipeline. So what has happened? The thread which is available, or the executor which is available in this machine, is picked up by the pipeline. But when the nightly job is trying to run, it is not able to find any executor. So that's the reason it is waiting. So now, unless and until the executor is not available, the nightly will not get started and your pipeline will be waiting. Now for this, what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and add the executors to 2, just to show you. As soon as I change to 2, you should see the nightly got triggered. So this is running on the second executor. And once this completes, it will be sending back the signal and the pipeline job will proceed further. Okay. So let's wait. So now you can see both of them completed. Okay. That is the nightly job also completed. And because of that, if you come back here, you can see it started, and once it is completed, it's sending back, and the pipeline is proceeding with the second stage. So this is where, by default, the build step will wait for the job to complete. Okay. So whatever job that we are taking, it will wait for that to complete. But it's not mandatory that every time you should wait. So that's where what you can do, if you do not want to wait, you want to just trigger and then proceed. Then what you can do, you have to add an option to say don't wait. Okay. Now to show this, what I'll do in the nightly job, we will add a step like I'll put for 30 seconds so that you can see the results. Right. And how do I tell the pipeline not to wait? This is where, along with the name of the job, you're going to say wait is false. Okay. So if I now put this, what will the pipeline do? Pipeline will just trigger this job and it will not wait, and then it will proceed with the next one. Okay. So watch this. When we run this, it just proceeds, that's all. It will go ahead, trigger the job, and then proceeds to the next stage, and it completes. However, if you come to nightly, you should see that if you refresh, this is still running. Okay, so that's where you can tell Jenkins whether to wait for the job that it is going to call, and this is where it's not mandatory that you have to call only at the end. So it's completely up to us. At any point of time, we can invoke it. Okay. So by default, if you do not give the wait, it will be true, so it will be waiting. But if you add wait as false, Jenkins will not wait, it will just trigger. Okay. So can you just try running this? No. Okay, has everyone tried it? Okay, I hope everyone has tried. So another thing that we need to know is, we saw this in a freestyle. When you're running a step, right? So it will always run the step from the default folder, which is remote root directory workspace in the name of the job folder, right? But what will happen when you're trying to run a pipeline, if you want to switch to some other folder and only certain steps you want to run in that folder, and after that you want to again use the same default folder, then what you can do, there is a directive or a block called dir. In that, you can specify whatever the steps you want to run into a particular folder, and the pipeline will run that steps in a different folder other than the remote root directory. Okay, now let's try this. So here what I'll do, I'll just have one small stage in which I'll first create a file. And I'm just creating a file called test first. And then the same way, I'll try to create another file at the end called test last. So now these two commands or the shell will get executed under the remote root directory by default. But instead what I want to run one more file, okay, called as dummy. And this I want to run in a different folder. So that's where in the dir block, you can give the location where it has to. For example, I'd say temp Jenkins. Now under temp Jenkins, this command will be executed, whereas these two will be executed in the remote root directory workspace folder. So that's how you can change the location where you want to run. Okay, so let's watch. Okay, so here, okay, watch this. The stage is running in this machine, so it picks up the remote root directory workspace, wherein the file would have got created here. But when you see exactly to run this command or step, it is trying to switch the folder and it's getting created under temp Jenkins. Okay, and when you come back, this command or the step will again get executed in the default remote root directory workspace. So to cross check, if I go to workspace, so this is the workspace. Here you can see the dummy file is not there, but you have the test first and the test last. So if you go to temp Jenkins directly, you should be able to see that dummy file. Okay. So go to the save machine. You can see the dummy file is created under temp Jenkins, whereas the other two files will be created under temp Jenkins workspace and so these two are here. This is how you can switch a folder for a step and then you can come back and then try running exactly back into the same folder. Okay. So that's where you're going to use a new block called directory block. Let's try this. this. Others have tried. So since it's more of a code, okay, so internally which uses Groovy based syntax, which is a domain specific language. We also have options like you can ignore some of the error or you can catch an exception and mark it as failed or not. Okay, so in that way, any step that you are running, you can ignore it. So what you can do is rather than allowing the just Jenkins pipeline to fail the entire stage, you can catch the error and then you can decide what kind of result that you want to publish. So whether you want to just mark it as unstable or whether you want to mark it as error or you want to just leave it as success, even though if it is a failure, then you can kind of use this. So any step that you are running, what you can do is you can just execute the whole step inside this catch error. So what I'll do is just take this example. Now here, I'm just giving to run anywhere, it doesn't matter. But for this stage, there is a step that I'm running, okay? And that step is sh exit 1. So by default, when we used to run this stage will be marked as error, right? So instead of that, I can use a catch error function, and within that, I can run this. And in that, the result, what is that I want to give, whereas what is the message I want to give, and the complete result of the stage what I want. So typically you can change these values also. Okay, but let me just show you how that works. You can see the pipeline status is called as unstable. Okay, that is because here you have given the total result, what is that you want to do whenever you get a error. However, what should be the status of this stage, which is failure? So you can see the stage is marked as failed, but even though it is marked as failed, it's proceeding with the next stage. So that's how, using catch error, you can decide whether you want to continue, and at the same time, what should be the output of the entire pipeline as well as a stage. So it will be easy for you to mark, because when you do some process like CI, if some of the step fails, you don't want to just stop your pipeline. Instead, you want to ignore. And how do you want to check the output? What is the expected result that you can put accordingly? Okay, so you can change the pipeline status using this catch error. But it might be really confusing that how should I remember so many logs which is there in the code, right? So especially when we talk about a step, okay? So what happens in Jenkins pipeline, there is a syntax generator. So do you see, for every job, there will be a pipeline syntax. You click on this, it will be showing you all the available steps which is there in the Jenkins freestyle. The same thing you can also take here and convert it as a pipeline script. For example, I was talking about catch error. So if you want catch error, then just go this place. And here you decide what is that you want to give, right? This is where, like I said, what is the message I want to give? What is the result? So you have these options available that you can choose. And then what should be the stage output? Again, you can take and then go ahead and generate. And this is what you're going to get. Not only this, for all the steps that you have in the Jenkins pipeline, you can use this snippet generator. For example, if you want the directory command, so that will be here, and which path that you want to change, you can just select it and generate. You can see it generates the block, so you can just copy paste this in. So everywhere, even if you want to have Git, so give the Git and give some URL, whatever is your repository. Okay. And which branch and which credentials that you want to use. Suppose if you have a specific credentials, you can give that and this is how the line that you will be having. Okay. So you just need to know what is the step that you're executing, and corresponding to that in the beginning, you can go ahead and use the snippet generator to generate a particular code. Okay, that you can copy paste it. Now to try this, just go ahead and execute and see how the result comes. And using the pipeline syntax, try to change this value of this, the build result and the stage result, and see how the output is coming. Can you try running? field. Did everyone try it? So now what happens is similar to conditions that we have in Ruby. In DSL also you can have conditions, because by default the pipeline will just pick up a stage to run. So what we can actually do is, for every stage we can in fact put a condition and tell whether the Jenkins pipeline should run or not, or only if the condition is returning successful, the Jenkins pipeline can pick that stage for executing. Now there are different conditions that we can give, whether it's a string or it's a numeric value, or whether it's a parameter that you're trying to take, or environment. So we'll try to see different combinations. In the first example, what we will see is we will try to check whether a condition in which an environment variable is available and that variable has an exact value that you want. Okay. So just to show this, now imagine that there is an environment variable and the name of that is deployed to, and I'm hardcoding the value as QA by default. So what I want is, I want to run 2 stages. However, I want to run stage 1 only when if my environment variable is equal. However, if the environment variable value is production, then I should run the second stage. Just like I want to run the stage 1 for QA, stage 2 for production. So how can we do? This is where I'm just hardcoding by giving a global environment variable called deploy2, and the value is QA. And now there is a new block called when block that is within the stage. So before running this step, Jenkins will try to execute or evaluate and find out the result. So that's where the condition here is saying if there is an environment variable called deploy2, and if that value of this variable is equal to QA, then this condition is considered true, then it will execute. Whereas if you come here, this is not true because the value of this variable is not production. That way, this condition is false. So Jenkins pipeline will skip this stage to execute. So let's just try. So here you can see stage 1 has been executed. However, stage 2 has been skipped because the condition. So look here, the condition is not matching. Because of that, stage 2 has been skipped. Okay, so this is how you can set up a condition, and only when the condition is returning true, Jenkins will run it. If not, Jenkins will just go ahead and that stage. What we saw is one example where we are leaving the conditions based on an environment variable. Same way, let's see a couple of more examples. So now let's try to have a Boolean parameter and then check how to set a condition. Now, what is a Boolean parameter? True. So to know this example, what I'll do, so I'm going to set a parameter for and name of it is toggle, then default is true. Now this is where if the Boolean value is returning true, then the condition itself will be written as true. So to do that, we are going to use in the condition a new keyword called expression or a new block called expression. Now in this, you are going to return the value of the parameter. So if this is set as true, then the expression will return true and the condition will be true and this will be executed. If the value of this parameter is false, then it will be returning it as false and the condition will also become false, then the stage will not be executed. Okay. Next one. So now let's try it. So it's asking when it's equal to true. Since this is true, just make there's only one stage and then execute it. Go ahead and remove this. Now boolean parameter will be false. Because of that, the stage will be executed. That's right. What is the condition returning? If the condition is returning true, only then the stage will be executed. If not, it will be skipped. Now, what are the type of conditions? One is Boolean and other one is variable, so that we can have for the choice. Okay. I'll show you one more. Now, we can use a string comparison because so far we were using only Boolean. What we can also now do is take a string parameter and we can also compare whether two strings are equal or not equal. So here, what I do in this example, we'll try to take a string parameter and it's calling it as person. And it's just I'm saying the condition here is when the parameter value that you're going to pass, which is a string, if it is equal to Adam, then go ahead and run this. Any chance if this is not matching with the value what you have given, remember it is case sensitive. So if it doesn't show, just run it once. Let's see, it shows. So if I leave this, the stage will. Now, if I try to run, if I give any other value, the string doesn't match. So you see that the stage is skipped. Okay. So this is how only if a condition for that stage, again, remember it is per stage we are making condition. So only if the condition is returning true, that stage will be picked up by output. Okay. Now, try running this and see how the condition. Okay. Let's see if it is- Okay, looks like I'm going to be happy with, here. Let me know once you copy this. Just try running this first and let me know, then we'll show. You can try this and let me know. Hey guys, have you tried running this first example? Can I go to the second one? Yeah, try this second one. Okay, have you guys completed? Hello. You guys tried it? Okay, if you guys have completed, then it's fine. Anyway, I'm just unable to copy paste now. So I'll put it in the chat. So you can take this and try out. If there's no question, then let me stop the session today. We'll meet tomorrow at some time. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day. Thank you.